They say a praying woman is a blessing. I used to believe that with all my heart. But after what I found out, I don't know anymore. My name's Harold. I'm 78 years old. And for most of my life, I thought I married a saint. My wife, Mabel, was the kind of woman who could silence a room just by folding her hands to pray. Folks in town said she had God's fire in her, like the Holy Spirit himself chose her to whisper secrets to in the middle of the night. And I, fool that I was, believed it every night, or maybe I should say every morning. She'd wake at exactly 1 o'clock. Not 12:59, not 1:01, always 1. She'd slip out from under the quilt, her side of the bed still warm, and shuffle into the next room. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of her whispering, her voice soft and trembling like wind through a crack in the window. I used to smile when I heard her. I thought, my wife's up talking to God. Well, holy woman, I'm married. I'd roll over, feeling proud. You don't find women like that anymore, I'd tell myself. Now, looking back, I wish I had gotten out of bed that first night. So, if you're watching, my friend, go ahead and like this video, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story. 'Cause this ain't just my story. It's the story of too many men who had to smile through the silence. I grew up in a small town in southern Missouri, in a place so quiet that when the wind stopped, you could hear the river breathe. My daddy was a church deacon. Hard man. The kind who never said, I love you, but made sure you were in the pew every Sunday, shoes shined, hair slicked, and mouth shut. Mama was the opposite, gentle, patient, always humming hymns while she cooked. But she didn't stand up to him much. Nobody did. Daddy used to say, a man's duty is to lead, and a woman's duty is to follow. That stuck with me, even after I got married, even when it hurts to believe it. So when Mabel said God woke her every night to pray, I didn't question her. I figured that was her way of following God's call. Who was I to interfere with that? But over the years, I noticed little things. Things that didn't sit right. Like how she always locked the front door when she went to pray. I used to think it was just a habit, maybe safety, but we lived in a town so small folks didn't even lock their cars. Then there were the phone calls she took during the day, whispered, quick, ending with a nervous laugh. Just Sister Agnes from church, she'd say. We're planning the bake sale. I didn't pry. I told myself good husbands trust their wives. I told myself a lot of things back then. Now I know some of y'all might be listening or reading this and thinking, how could you not know? How could you sleep beside someone for 25 years and not see it? Truth is, when love and faith wrap themselves together, you stop asking questions. You start worshiping the image of a person instead of who they really are. If you've ever believed in someone so much that you ignored the cracks, tell me in the comments, because I need to know I'm not the only fool who did. There was one night, must have been around 1978, when I woke up and felt a chill. The bed beside me was cold, but I could hear her humming, not praying, humming, low, almost like a lullaby. It wasn't him either. I've been raised on every church tune from Amazing Grace to Rock of Ages, but this one was different. I crept to the door, cracked it open just enough to see her silhouette. The lamp on her table cast her shadow across the wall, long, trembling, like a flame about to die. And in her hand, she wasn't holding a Bible. She was holding a letter. I remember her fingers tracing it, trembling like she was scared to touch it, but couldn't stop. Then she pressed it to her chest and cried. I wanted to go to her, ask what was wrong, hold her. But something in that room, something heavy, sacred, or maybe damned, kept me frozen. I backed away, and I told myself it wasn't my place. That's what silence does. It teaches you that love means pretending not to see. The years passed, and her nightly prayers became part of our life. Our kids grew up, left home, had kids of their own, and every time they'd visit, Mabel would tell them, always listen when God calls, no matter the hour. They'd nod, like their mama was a prophet. But inside, I started to feel hollow. You know that feeling when you look at someone you've known half your life, and suddenly you can't recognize them anymore? Like you've been sleeping beside a stranger, wearing your wife's face. I thought, maybe it was me. Maybe I'd grown bitter. Old men like me get that way sometimes. Then one night, everything changed. It was a Tuesday, cold, even for February. I'd gone to bed early after fixing the pipes in the barn. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of her crying again. Not soft this time, loud, broken, desperate. I got up, opened the door, and for the first time in 25 years, I walked into that room. She didn't see me at first. She was on her knees, her nightgown soaked in tears, that same old letter spread open before her. Her hands were shaking, and she was whispering, I'm sorry, over and over. When she finally looked up and saw me, she went still, like she'd seen a ghost. I remember her eyes, those gray-green eyes that once looked so full of light, now wide with terror. Harold, she said, voice cracking, you shouldn't be here. And that's when I saw what was beside the letter, a small framed photo, a man, younger than me, maybe in his 40s, smiling. It wasn't a church friend. It wasn't a cousin. I'd never seen him before in my life. I asked her, who's that? She didn't answer. And for a long moment, the only sound in that room was the clock ticking, the kind of slow, heavy ticking that sounds like judgment. That's where I'll stop for now, because what she told me next, it changed everything I ever believed about love, faith, and forgiveness. If you ever found out something that broke your spirit, but somehow kept you breathing, if you've ever had a smile in church while your heart was bleeding, then stay with me for part 2. And if this story hits somewhere deep, leave a comment. Not for sympathy, but for truth, because silence is what kept me blind for 25 years. And I can't let silence win again. Have you ever felt your heart stop beating while you're still standing? That's what it felt like that night. Seeing that picture, seeing him. I'd been married to Mabel for 25 years. I knew every freckle on her hands, every gray hair she tried to hide with walnut dye, every tremble in her voice when she prayed. But I didn't know him. He was clean-cut in some kind of military uniform, army, maybe, handsome, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in an old Life magazine. The photo looked worn, edges soft from being handled too much, too lovingly. And my wife, my holy praying wife, had been clutching it like a lifeline. I asked her again, voice shaking this time, who's that, Mabel? She opened her mouth, but no sound came, just a faint, broken sob. Then she did something I never thought I'd see her do. She looked ashamed, not sad, not scared, ashamed. Sit down, Harold, she said finally, please. I didn't want to sit, but my knees gave out anyway. The air felt too heavy to stand in. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then turned the picture face down like she couldn't bear to look at it. That's Daniel, she whispered. He was my first love. Now, I'd heard that name before. Long ago, when we were young and courting, she once mentioned a boy from church who'd gone off to war. She said he was like a brother to her. Nothing more. I never thought about it again. But as she started to speak, my stomach turned cold. Daniel and I, she paused, trying to find her breath. We were supposed to get married in 45, but he got drafted. I wrote to him every week for 2 years. Then one day, I got a letter back, but not from him, from his mother. She said he died in Germany. Her voice broke on that word, died. I thought my world was over, she said. So when you came along, Harold, you were kind, steady, God-fearing. You made me feel safe again. But I never stopped dreaming about him. I never stopped hearing his voice. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it cracked. All those nights she'd been praying, all those years I thought she was talking to God, she'd been talking to him. I didn't say anything for a long while. The clock ticked. The wind outside howled against the house. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once and went quiet again. It was like the whole world knew it needed a hush and let her finish. She looked at me, not defiant, not proud, just tired. After our 3rd anniversary, she said, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a picture of him, alive. She covered her face and began to cry again. He didn't die, Harold. He'd been captured, spent years in a camp. When he came back, he looked for me, but I was already married. So he wrote one letter, just one, saying he forgave me for moving on. My jaw tightened. So you've been talking to him? No, she said quickly. He's gone now. For real this time. Died 5 years ago. But I kept that letter. Every night I read it. Every night I prayed he'd forgive me. That's what you heard. You ever realize your whole marriage was built on a ghost? I felt like a fool. Like I'd been sharing a bed with the shadow of another man. I got up and walked out of that room. Didn't say a word. She tried to call after me, but I couldn't look at her. I went outside, barefoot, into the freezing night. The moon was high and cold and white. I stood there staring at the empty sky, wondering how long she'd been living two lives. One with me, one with a memory. My breath came out in fog. I remember thinking, God, if you're real, why would you let me live a lie this long? And for the first time in 50 years, I didn't feel him answer. The next morning, I didn't eat breakfast. I couldn't. I just sat at the table while she moved quietly around the kitchen, like we were both ghosts now. She tried to talk, but I wouldn't. Not because I hated her, I didn't. I just didn't know what to say. How do you forgive someone for loving a dead man more than the living one beside her? Now, I know some of you listening might say, Harold, it was just old love. Everyone has a past. But 25 years of midnight prayers? 25 years of lying beside me while whispering another man's name? That ain't just old love. That's worship. And I was the altar she knelt beside while her heart belonged to someone else. If you've ever been the second choice in someone's story, if you've ever felt invisible beside the memory of another, drop a comment below. I want to know how you healed, because I'm still figuring it out. 2 days later, she came to me holding that same letter. You should read it, she said softly. I didn't want to, but something in her voice, that quiet, trembling guilt, made me take it. The paper was yellowed, creased from years of folding. I unfolded it, and the first line hit me like a punch to the gut. My dearest Mabel, if you're reading this, it means you chose another life. I understand. I forgive you. But know this, a part of me will always wait for you in prayer, no matter where you are. I stopped there. Couldn't go on. I looked at her and said, so that's what you've been doing all these years? Praying he'll still wait for you. Tears streamed down her face. No, Harold, I was praying God would make me stop. That broke me, because for the first time I realized she was fighting, not against me, not against him, but against herself, against the kind of guilt that eats you alive from the inside out. For a long time after that, I slept in the guest room. Couldn't bear to share a bed she once climbed out of for another man's ghost. She never complained. She never begged me to come back. She just kept waking up at 1 a.m., sitting in silence instead of praying. Sometimes I'd hear her cry. Sometimes I'd hear nothing at all. And I'll tell you something, silence can be louder than any sin. Now I'm old, older than I ever thought I'd get. She's gone now, buried next to me in the churchyard. I visit sometimes, though I still don't know what to say. Forgiveness is funny like that. It's not loud. It's not sudden. It's quiet, slow. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Some nights, I still wake up around 1. Old habits, I guess. I lie there and listen to the wind and wonder she's finally at peace. I don't think she meant to hurt me. I think she was just a woman trying to love 2 men in one lifetime, one made of flesh, one made of memory. And I guess I was a man too proud to admit I envied a ghost. If you're still here listening, if you've ever carried the weight of love that turned into pain, if you've ever forgiven someone who didn't ask for it, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for yourself. Because sometimes telling your story is the only way to keep from drowning in it. They say the dead can't talk. But I swear to you, after Mabel passed, I could still hear her voice in every creak of that old farmhouse. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was guilt. Either way, she wasn't done speaking to me. The funeral was small, just me, the preacher, our daughter Linda, and a handful of neighbors. She looked peaceful in that pine box, her hands folded over her chest like she finally found the rest she'd been chasing at 1 a.m. for half a lifetime. I thought burying her would bury the pain too. It didn't. It only planted it deeper. 2 weeks later, I started clearing out her things. I thought it'd be easy, just fold some dresses, pack a few Bibles, donate the rest. But grief has a way of slowing time. Every drawer I opened felt like prying open another wound. Then, tucked behind a stack of them books on the top shelf of her wardrobe, I found a small cedar box. The kind of box you'd hide love letters in. It was locked with a tiny brass latch, and for a moment I almost put it back. I told myself a man ought to respect the secrets of the dead. But curiosity, it's a kind of hunger that doesn't quit. I took it to the kitchen table, found a screwdriver, and popped the latch. Inside were a few yellowed envelopes, a rosary, and a folded birth certificate. My hand started to shake. The certificate was dated 1946, a year before we married. The name at the top, Daniel Whitaker Jr. Mother, Mabel and Harris. Father, Daniel Whitaker. My stomach dropped. I read it again, hoping I had misunderstood. But there it was, clear as gospel truth. Mabel had a child she never told me about. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at that paper. I thought about those nights she'd prayed, the tears, the trembling hands. Was she praying for him? For the boy she gave away? If you've ever found something that turned your memories inside out, something that made you question who you've been loving all your life, drop a comment below. Because that's where I was, floating in a fog thick with betrayal and sorrow, not sure which was heavier. There was also a letter, postmarked 1946, sent from a Catholic home for unwed mothers in Kansas City. It read, Mrs. Harris, we have arranged for the safe adoption of your son. The couple is from Iowa, unable to bear children, and eager to provide him with a Christian upbringing. Per your request, the records will remain sealed. At the bottom, in Mabel's handwriting, forgive me, Lord. Let him never hate me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to curse Daniel Whitaker's name. Curse the war. Curse the God who let me live in the dark all those years. Instead, I just sat there, crying into my callous hands like a boy. All that praying. Every 1 a.m. whisper I'd mistaken for holiness had been her begging forgiveness for giving up her child. Not adultery, not even longing, but guilt, pure, bone-deep guilt. And all those years I thought she was praying for Daniel Whitaker's soul. She was really praying for Daniel Whitaker Jr. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning I called our daughter, Linda. I told her come over, that I had something to show her. When she saw the box and the papers, she went pale. Daddy, she whispered, do you think he's still alive? I don't know, I said, but I reckon I need to find out. So, at 78 years old, I did something I'd never done before. I went digging to the past. You'd think after decades a trail would be cold, but the internet has a way of resurrecting ghosts. Linda helped me. We looked through records, church archives, and obituaries. Most led nowhere. Then one night, she called me, voice shaking. Daddy, I think I found him. A Daniel Whitaker Jr., born 1946, adopted by a couple in Des Moines, now living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 76 years old. I remember staring at the phone, not saying a word. Part of me wanted to meet him right away. Part of me wanted to burn that box and pretend I never found it, because meeting him wouldn't just mean meeting her son. It would mean facing the part of Mabel she never gave me. A week later, I drove to Tulsa. Old Ford pickup, windows down, heart pounding like I was a sinner on Judgment Day. The whole way there, I kept hearing Mabel's voice. Forgive me, Lord. Let him never hate me. When I got to the address Linda found, it was a little one-story house with a white porch swing. There were wind chimes on the eaves, soft, silver, almost like church bells. I sat there a long time, watching curtains move. Then I knocked. The man who opened the door had eyes the same gray-green as Mabel's. He looked at me, confused. Can I help you, sir? My throat went dry. I knew your mother. I managed, a long time ago. He studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. You'd better come in. We sat at his kitchen table. He poured coffee, strong black, the same way Mabel liked it. When I told him her name, he froze. She wrote to me once, he said quietly, about 10 years ago. said she was sorry for everything. I never wrote back. Didn't know what to say. He slid open a drawer and pulled out a folded letter. The handwriting, familiar curls and slants, made my heart twist. My sweet boy, not a day goes by that I don't think of you. If you ever find in your heart to forgive me, know that I never stopped loving you. I wanted you to have a life better than mine. I hope I did right by letting you go. Your mother, Mabel Harris Whitaker, once. We sat there in silence after that. Two old men bound by a woman. We both loved in different ways. He looked at me and said, "You must have loved her a lot to come here." I did. I whispered. Still do. He smiled sadly. Then maybe we both got a little piece of her. And I realized then that forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It comes in small, trembling steps, like a man walking out of a dark church into morning light. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The house was still, the air heavy with that stale quiet that follows nights of broken sleep. I made myself coffee and sat by the window, staring out toward the barn. The fog hung low over the pasture, like a blanket trying to hide the past from sight. But some things once seen can't be covered anymore. All night, I kept seeing that name in my head. Samuel, my son, who never got to be my son. My wife's child, born of sin and silence. You know, when I first met Mabel, I thought she was the purest soul I'd ever known. She laughed with her whole body, like she was grateful for the air itself. I remember the first time she told me she wanted a family. She held my hand and said, "God gives what he deems ready." I didn't know then she'd already given life once and lost it. After finding the locket and the half-burnt letter, I spent the morning searching the rest of her things. I felt like a grave robber, sifting through the remnants of a life that wasn't mine to touch anymore. Her Bible was still on the nightstand, pages worn and soft. I flipped through it aimlessly until a folded paper slipped out and landed on my lap. It wasn't yellowed with age like the others. It looked newer, like she'd written it in her final years. My heart started racing as I opened it. Her handwriting, still delicate and slanted, read, "Harold, if you ever find this, please know I tried to tell you. Every night I prayed for the boy I gave away. I begged God to forgive me for the silence, for the lie that became our marriage. You never knew the truth, but you were the answer to a prayer I didn't deserve. Samuel was born of shame, but he was the proof I was still capable of love. When you asked why I always prayed at 1 a.m., it was because that's the hour he came into the world. I felt closest to him then. I prayed he was alive. I prayed he was loved." My hands shook as I read. I could barely breathe. My wife's holiness wasn't born from faith. It was born from guilt. For 25 years, she'd been mourning a child in secret, right under my roof. I folded the letter back and pressed it against my chest. You ever realize your whole life was built on someone else's silence? It's like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the crack beneath your feet. I wanted to be angry, Lord knows I did, but all I could feel was grief. Not just for her, but for the boy who never had a chance to know his mother. So I did something I hadn't done in decades. I drove to the old county records office. The clerk there, a thin woman with gray curls and kind eyes, helped me sift through birth records from the 1950s. I told her I was looking for a child born to Mabel Carter. After a few hours, she found it, a birth certificate. Samuel Carter, born August 17, 1952. Father listed as unknown. Mother, Mabel Ruth Carter. The boy was born right here in this county hospital. But what hit me hardest was what came next. In the margin, written faintly in pencil were the words, "Adopted by the Miller family, Decatur County." I sat there staring at it, the words burning into my brain. Miller, my father's family name. My cousin's folks lived in Decatur County. For a second, I thought it was a coincidence. But when I asked for the adoption record, the clerk frowned. "You'll need court approval for that," she said softly. I thanked her and left, but my head was spinning. Could it be? Could the boy have been adopted by someone connected to my own bloodline? When I got home, I went through old photos, old letters. Anything that could connect the dots. I found a Christmas card from 1978. It was from my cousin, Edward Miller, and his wife, Ruth. They had 2 children, one named Sarah and one named Sam. The handwriting was neat. Under their names, it said, "With love from your family in Decatur." I nearly dropped the card. My knees went weak. For years, we exchanged holiday cards, sent little gifts back and forth. And all this time, my wife's lost son, our lost son, had been part of my own family circle. You can't make this kind of thing up. Life has a cruel way of tying knots you never meant to tie. I tried to reach Edward that same night. Phone disconnected. I called around, found out he'd passed some years back. His daughter, Sarah, still lived in town. So I wrote her a letter, told her I was trying to find her brother Sam, that I might be family. Weeks went by before she replied. When her letter came, I could barely tear it open fast enough. Asterisk, "Dear Mr. Thompson, I'm not sure if this will bring comfort or pain, but Sam passed away in 2010. He struggled with drinking and said he never felt like he belonged anywhere. He used to talk about a woman in his dreams, a woman who prayed for him, say he'd wake up at 1 a.m. and feel her near. We never knew much about his birth mother, but if you have any connection, I think he'd be glad someone's still thinking of him." Asterisk, I put the letter down and wept. Not quietly either, the kind of weeping that comes from the pit of your soul, the kind that empties you. Mabel had prayed for 25 years for a boy who was already gone, and all that time, she believed God was keeping him safe. Maybe in a way he was just not in this world anymore. Now, I don't know what to make of faith. I don't know what prayer means anymore. But I do know this. The woman I loved wasn't pretending to be holy. She was just holding on to hope in the only way she knew how. Sometimes, I sit in her old chair at 1 a.m. I close my eyes and whisper her name. I don't pray exactly, but I talk to her. I tell her I found the truth. I tell her Samuel's not lost anymore. Not to her, not to me, and to anyone listening right now. If you've ever kept a secret thinking it'd spare someone pain, please comment below. Tell me your story. Maybe we'll understand together what silence costs. Because silence doesn't save souls. It just delays the breaking. If you're still here with me, hit that like button, not for me, but for Mabel. For every mother who prayed in the dark and carried her shame alone. For every man who thought holiness was peace when it was really just penance. I'll see you next time. But before you go, remember this. Truth has its own kind of mercy. You just have to be brave enough to open the letter beneath the cross. They say time heals all wounds. I've lived long enough to tell you that's a lie. Time doesn't heal, it hardens. It wraps the wound in scar tissue until you almost forget it's there. Then one quiet night, something, a sound, a memory, a letter, cracks it open, and you bleed all over again. It's been 6 months since I found Mabel's final letter. 6 months since I learned the truth about Samuel, the boy who should have been my son. I buried her Bible beneath the magnolia tree she planted the year we married. Every morning, the sunlight cuts through its branches and lands right where she used to kneel. I like to think she still prays there, even now. Some nights, I still wake up at 1 a.m. Old habits die hard, I guess. The house creaks, the wind hums through the eaves, and I swear I can still hear her whispering his name under her breath, Samuel. I've stopped asking God why. Some questions don't have answers that fit inside a man's lifetime, but I keep talking anyway. That's what faith is sometimes, talking into silence and hoping it echoes somewhere you can't see. Last month, a letter came in the mail with no return address. Just my name, Harold Thompson, written in a neat, unfamiliar hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper and an old photograph. The picture showed a man in his 40s, standing by a rusted pickup with a boyish grin. His eyes, they were Mabel's eyes. I knew it before I even read the note. Dear Mr. Thompson, my name is Daniel. I'm Samuel Miller's son. My father passed when I was young, but my Aunt Sarah told me you'd written once, looking for him. She said you might be the only person who could tell me who he really was. My hands trembled so bad I had to sit down. Samuel's son. Somewhere out there, a piece of Mabel still walked the earth, laughing, breathing, alive. I spent 3 days drafting a reply. What do you say to a stranger Who carries the face of the woman you buried and the blood of the boy you never met? In the end, I wrote the truth. I told him about Mabel, about the prayers at 1 a.m., about the silence that nearly swallowed us whole. 2 weeks later, Daniel showed up at my door. He was taller than me, with callous hands and a farmer's tan, the kind you can't fake. His voice shook when he spoke. "You're the man my grandmother prayed to forget," he said softly. Then he smiled. "But I think she forgave herself in the end." We sat on the porch for hours. I made coffee. He drank it black, just like I do. He told me his father never talked much about his past, only that he felt haunted by something unnamed. Dad used to say, "Daniel told me, that forgiveness is a story that dies if you don't tell it." That stuck with me. When the sun started to set, Daniel asked if he could see where Mabel was buried. I took him behind the house, past the lilac bush, to the old magnolia. The wind picked up just then, carrying the scent of earth and blossoms. Daniel knelt beside the tree and touched the ground. He didn't say much, just closed his eyes for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Thank you." We didn't talk about Samuel after that. We didn't need to. Some truths don't need retelling. They just need to be witnessed. After he left, I sat by the fire and thought about all the years I'd spent mistaking silence for strength. The men in my generation, we were raised to believe pain was something you buried deep, that real men didn't cry, didn't break, didn't confess. But let me tell you something. That kind of strength isn't noble. It's poison. It eats you from the inside until you mistake numbness for faith. If you're listening right now, and you're carrying something you buried so deep you can't even name it, talk. Please, write it down. Tell somebody before it turns you hollow. Comment below. Tell me if you've ever had to forgive someone who never asked to be forgiven. I read every message. It helps me remember that none of us carry this weight alone. Because the truth is, silence doesn't make you righteous. It just keeps you lonely. A few weeks after Daniel's visit, I went to the church for the first time since Mabel's funeral. I sat in the very back pew, where the light hit the stained glass just right. The preacher was new, young, probably half my age. He talked about grace like it was something soft, something warm. When the service ended, he walked over and said, "You look like a man with a story." I laughed. "You don't have enough Sundays for it, son." He smiled. "Then tell it somewhere it can live." And maybe that's what I'm doing now, letting it live. Not as confession or a sermon, but as a record of two souls who tried to do right and failed, and kept on praying anyway. The night Daniel left, I dreamed of Mabel for the first time in years. She wasn't young or glowing like before. She was older, her hair gray, her eyes tired but kind. We were sitting on the porch swing, holding hands. She looked at me and said, "He knows now." Then she smiled, that same soft smile she used to give when she was hiding something too heavy to say aloud. I woke up crying. But for once, it wasn't from pain. It was released. I'm an old man now. I know my days are numbered. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Secrets don't die with us. They rot through the generations until someone finally digs them up and holds them to the light. Mabel's prayers weren't lies. They were love in disguise. Twisted by shame, maybe, but still love. She carried that love every night at 1 a.m., believing God could hear her. Maybe he did. Maybe I just wasn't listening close enough. So tonight, like every night, I'll wake up at 1 a.m. I'll sit in her chair, whisper her name, and pray. Not for forgiveness. Not even for peace. Just for understanding. Because in the end, understanding is the holiest thing we can offer one another. And if you've made it this far, thank you. Share this if you've ever loved someone imperfectly. Like this if you've ever learned that faith isn't about purity. It's about endurance. And remember, some prayers aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be heard. You know, people think stories end when the pain does. But pain doesn't end. It just learns to speak softer. I've carried this one for nearly a lifetime, like a stone in my pocket, smooth from all the years I've turned it over in secret. I thought silence would keep it holy. Turns out, silence just kept it heavy. I'm telling it now because the years have thinned the walls around my heart. Because the truth, well, It grows restless when it's buried too long. It starts whispering at night, asking to be remembered. And if you're lucky, you learn to listen before it fades for good. I'm not the same man who lived that story. Back then, I mistook quiet for strength, duty for love, and shame for faith. Now I know better. Now I know that confession isn't weakness. It's a kind of resurrection. Each word I've spoken tonight is a seed dropped in the dark. Maybe it'll bloom in someone else's heart. Someone who's still too afraid to name their hurt. If that's you, I want you to hear this. You survived the fire. You don't owe anyone your ashes. You still get to grow things. You still get to be soft, even after the world tries to harden you. Maybe you're watching this late, long after midnight, and something inside you's trembling because the story feels too close. If it does, leave a word down there, a name, a thought, a single "I understand." I'll read it, and I'll know I wasn't the only one who had to learn how to breathe again. If this story touched you, click the like. Not for me, but for the ones who never got to speak their truth. And if you want to walk with me a little longer, hit subscribe. There's still more to tell before I'm gone. As for me, I think I've said enough for one lifetime. The man who began this story was Harold Thompson, but the one who ends it, he's just a grandfather learning how to forgive himself. So I'll leave you with this. When the clock strikes 1 and the house is still and the prayers sound like breathing, that's not grief calling anymore. That's grace coming home. Good night, my friends, and thank you for listening.